Hi, I'm Arnie Gunderson from Fairewinds Associates. Today is Thursday, March 31st, 2011. In the last 2 days, the Fukushima plant has kind of been stable but precarious, kind of like balancing on the edge of a cliff, but not going over and not being pulled back either. I wanted to give you my opinion of a couple of the more significant pieces of information that have come out in the last 2 days. In broad terms, there's very large amounts of liquids still being released to the environment, very large amounts of gases still being released to the environment. And the other thing is that no one ever envisioned this type of recovery from an accident even a month ago before Fukushima happened. Well, let's talk about the liquid and gaseous releases. The New York Times is reporting that 200 tons of radioactive liquid are being poured into the nuclear reactors and the fuel pool at Fukushima every day. Well, where's it going? If it's going in, it's coming out. And it's coming out two ways. It's coming out as radioactive steam, and it's coming out as radioactive water. So if you're putting 200 tons in, 200 tons is coming out. In engineering terms, that's called feed and bleed. And what you're feeding in as clean water is bleeding out as radioactive steam and radioactive water. Well, there's some indications off-site that the releases are very large. The fuel's clearly damaged, significantly damaged, and of course the releases are going to be large with 200 tons of releases every day. That boils down to a couple things. The IAEA, that's the International Atomic Energy Agency, has found that 25 miles away from the reactor, there's been deposition of radioactive material to the tune of 2 million becquerels per square meter. Now, what does that mean? A square meter is about 3 feet by 3 feet, meter by a meter, and 2 megabecquerels is 2 million disintegrations every second is being deposited in roughly 3 feet by 3 feet. Now, that's well above what the IAEA would say you should evacuate if the levels are that high. So there are places out well beyond where the Japanese are evacuating that should be evacuated based on the deposition of radioactive materials nearby. To give you an example, at Chernobyl, the exclusion zone was 500,000 becquerels. This is 4 times higher than Chernobyl. Now, there are different isotopes, and some of these will decay away, and the Chernobyl ones are longer lived, but these are very serious concentrations of radioactivity being deposited on the ground from the radioactive steam coming out of the plant. The next thing is the water. We've seen incredibly high concentrations in the radioactive water in trenches on site. There's indications that the survey meters simply can't read high enough to measure the amount of radiation coming off the water. And another indication is what's in the ocean. Offshore radioactive readings in the ocean have gone up and are now over 3,000 times higher than the standards that are routinely expected. That's not coming from the air. The ocean's too big to be polluted by what's coming out of the airborne releases. It's clearly leaking from the trenches into the ocean. They haven't found the leak, but the only source of quantities of radioactive material large enough to pollute the ocean has got to be leakage from these trenches. So with 200 tons of liquid going in and 200 tons of liquid going out, it's reasonable to expect that the ocean is going to be polluted because it's clearly leaking in. Now, there's one other interesting reading that was detected on site. There are several what's called heavy elements that are being detected on the ground. We talked about plutonium in the last video, but there are some other ones too, something called cerium, which is also one of these that doesn't easily go volatile. And that it's on the ground also indicates significant fuel damage, most likely from the fuel pool in Unit 4. Well, it's important to realize that this feed and bleed operation that's going on was never anticipated a month ago by anyone who ever planned to mitigate an accident. A month ago, the worst accident that was ever assumed was 1% of the fuel in one reactor melted. We've got 70% of the fuel in 3 reactors melting. A month ago, we thought the containment would leak at 0.5% per day. Now we know the containment is leaking much more than 0.5% per day. And a month ago, we thought that the radioactivity would go high up a stack, and in fact, we're finding that the stacks don't work and the radiation's on the ground. The net effect of this is that in the Fukushima vicinity, exposures are probably 500 to 1,000 times higher than anticipated in the accident analysis that was, that was reasonable a month ago. Also, a month ago, no one ever envisioned the possibility of a fuel pool burning. That's still a possibility. Brookhaven National Labs back in 1997 did a study that said that the consequences of a fuel pool burning would be 137,000 fatalities from lung cancer. That's a serious study, and it's a number that we still need to be concerned about. Now, the difference between what's happened and what we thought would happen is that everyone believed that the containment would contain, and it's not. The plan was that what was in the reactor would get recirculated in the reactor, and none of that material would come out into the groundwater. And so these exposures are much, much higher as a result of what's happened to Fukushima. Well, thank you very much, and I'll get back to you as more develops.